couple of weeks ago, I was visiting a friend. This is a woman who's actually a friend of Ananda's. She knows these teachings well and she loves them. But we were having a little visit, and I don't remember what the context was, but at one point she looked at me and she was referring to the community, not this congregation, but to the community that many of us live in. And she said to me, "It must be so hard living at Ananda." And it really surprised me because I said to her, "Why do you say that?" And she said, "All those people," just like all those personalities, all those people that you need to deal with. I see it's not striking all of you the way it struck me. I thought, how perfect for this reading where we're talking about seeing God in everyone, and she just felt so suffocated by the idea of being around all of these people all the time. It was easy to understand what she was talking about. I remember, this was many years ago. I was talking with Asha once about somebody. I was pretty new here, and I was complaining, and I was saying this person's out there and they're teaching people, and she said, when somebody complains to me about somebody like this, I always think, let's just take them out to the courtyard and shoot them. What are we going to do with all of our personalities? Because not only do we have them, but most of the time we're seeing those personalities. This is exactly what Jesus was trying to teach his disciples here. This was to see beyond the human being, to see beyond the personality, to really see and love God in everyone. And it was such a radical teaching for the time. It's radical even now, just hearing those couple of stories. A couple of 1,000 years later, and it's complicated for us to try and hear this, live like this, get this lesson. But Jesus was here during a time in this cycle of time that was called Kali Yuga. It was a very dark time. It was a very materialistic time. Literally was likened to the Dark Ages. These were such radical ideas. And Jesus wasn't just saying, I want you to see who I am, I want you to be good. He was saying, I want you to acquire my consciousness. I want you to see what just happened, and I'm going to teach you through all of his teachings how your consciousness can and should become like mine. That is, should, if in fact you want to really know what he refers to so many times. We read it through the Bible, the kingdom of heaven. And it was very challenging. A couple weeks ago, I gave a class on the Beatitudes, and it made me realize, just in the language he was using, he was given a really hard job to do. It was hard enough in 1920 and up until 1950 when our teacher, Paramahansa Yogananda, lived here. But we're in a whole other age, and still it would be challenging. We're in a time where consciousness is being uplifted, where we have words and terminology and a way to think about these things. We talk about energy. When I first came onto the path, back in the late 70s, I've mentioned this before, I had never heard the word Swami. I didn't know what these things were. It was just not common in the United States, but look how far we've come, even in one lifetime. But when I think about when Jesus was here, I realize how hard it is. Also, he was speaking to people like us today still, who are literally wired to think differently. It's a part of our brain. It's in the brain that we think of things from a dualistic nature. We actually now have proof of this. So we come in and we very quickly learn about me and mine, and this is where I am, and that's where you are, and this is good, and that's not, that there's an object and a subject, that there's good and bad and right and wrong. And it's so much a part of how we're just conditioned from the word go. We don't give it much thought. Some of us do, of course, because we've been studying these teachings, but the world as a whole doesn't. And we get lost in that. We follow that delusion. We get caught up in a dream of separateness. It's almost like getting caught in a mirage. And we try very hard to get what we need out in the world to take care of us. And even though repeatedly we find out we can't satisfy our heart's deepest yearning out there, it really is very much like a mirage, because you really think you're going to get to that drink. You're so thirsty, and you think you're going to find the water and drink, but you know, you're in the desert, and when you get there, there's not really any water there. This is the wonderful nature of the parable of the woman at the well. When Jesus says you can drink all that water, all that you want, you're still going to be thirsty. When you get there, what you think you were looking for, it doesn't quench your thirst. And we are just so caught up in that. And this is what Jesus and every other great master who's ever come has been trying to say to us. You cannot attain what you think you want. You cannot solve your problems. You can't find your heart's deepest yearnings when you're coming from this place of duality, of right and wrong, of problems that need to be solved, of good and bad. It's like having the wrong operating system, and it tells you, no, I'm sorry, you can't upload this new application. You can't get there from here. And you say, but I need to. I need to feel more at peace. I need to feel more loved. I need all these things. And Jesus comes and he says, if you listen to me, if you can hear what I'm saying, I'm going to show you that this world is so different than what you think it is. That you have been living with in a complete delusion. And I'm going to show you that. And you know, his disciples, just like many of us, many of the people in the world today, but again, even a little more sort of steadfastly holding on to the world as they saw it, they're saying, we just have no idea what you're talking about. And Jesus keeps trying to say to them, there is no separation. You're absolutely wrong. All of how you're holding everything, you're not separate from anything. And he says it over and over in the Bible. He just keeps repeating it. I and my Father are one. Everything I am, you are too. I am the vine and you're the branch. Everything flows, he says. Love thy neighbor as thyself. He just keeps trying to tell us in every way what he says here. We are all completely connected. the whole and the parts are all one, and that they are interdependent. They're sitting in a sea of mutual need, of mutual need to be receptive, to open your heart, to remember that we're one with everything. And Jesus keeps trying to say it. He says, you just absolutely have it wrong. And what you need to do to get it right means find what you're looking for, is you need to move from this place of mind, of really feeling that there's an out there and an in here, and you need to move into your heart. And the heart isn't, when he's talking about that, it's not a beating organ. It's not a place of great emotion. It's a state of being that is intuitively perceptive, that is spiritual by nature, that looks for superconscious solutions to things, and more than anything, that only functions from a unitive perspective. The heart brings everyone together. And Jesus says, I want to show you how to look at the world differently so that you can see. God is in everything. God is in every atom of creation. God is in the infinite and in the infinitesimal. And if you want to attain the kingdom of heaven, he's saying you will have to move into that state of consciousness. And then we ask ourselves, what is the kingdom of heaven? What does that mean? What is he even offering us? Because anybody who's grown up in a Judeo-Christian reality thinks of heaven as something that's up there, some very beautiful rendition of what we already have, some place that we die and we go to. And then we have to rethink that, because that doesn't make much sense, and we don't even know what we're attaining. That is not what the kingdom of heaven is. It's not what Jesus is offering us. Jesus is offering us not a place that we die and go to, but a place that we awake into. We don't die and go there. We awaken and we go there. We don't even go there. We actually have to learn to come from there. And Jesus spends his life trying to refine our perception of this inner reality. That's what he's doing. He's saying the kingdom of heaven is a state of consciousness. It's in here. And it's only from in there that you can learn these teachings, that you can understand what I'm trying to tell you. You will never get to know the truth from where you are. There's no line connecting it. But if you go inside, if you develop a more pure sense of the inner reality, where the kingdom of heaven is, another phrase that Jesus uses over and over in the Bible, then, he says, you will be able to find God, to know pure love. And finding God really just means attaining that level of consciousness. And we go to the heart. And from the heart, which is what Swamiji is telling us here, from the heart, by serving that which is God in everyone, by consciously choosing to see the divine in everyone as much as we can, the heart begins to open. Swamiji says, I don't remember if it's in this reading or in the more expanded reading, but he says it so beautifully. The transformation is in the expansion. We don't have to understand it. We don't have to study the theology of it and get it all up here. All we need to do is love more, care more. Doesn't matter if it doesn't make any sense, that as the heart opens and expands, we are transported to a place of realizing our oneness. Blessed are the pure in heart, Jesus says. That means blessed are the people who yearn for one thing and one thing only, and that is to know God, for they shall see God. And what does that mean? That means we will feel connected to the whole. We will be in that place of an indivisible reality. That is what love is. The only true self is that love from our heart to the heart of every other living being, every manifestation, the infinite and the infinitesimal. You know, there's a movie that came to mind when I was reading this called The Feast of Babette. I don't know who remembers it. It's an older movie than many of you sitting here. But it was a very beautiful movie, and without taking a lot of time to tell it, it's about a woman who has to leave France and go to Denmark. And it's complicated. There's always a love affair involved, and there's always poverty of some sort, and all of that's here. But she's sent to take care of people in a small town who are very God-loving people, but over the years, hard times have come to them. A lot of the population's died. They're not feeling as much in tune with the divine. They're really not feeling as inspired as they had been. And this is in the early 1900s is where it takes place. And she was a great chef in France, but nobody knew that. She had never talked about it. She just felt that life was behind her. But it was a passion. She loved it. She loved serving beautiful food. So one day, she enters a contest, just as a fluke, and she wins 10,000 francs, a huge amount of money at the time. And she decides that she's going to serve all of these people. She's going to find that place in herself again, where she experiences that love. She buys new crystals, she buys china, she buys the finest food. She invites everybody from the town, and she serves them this meal. They feel like good Christians. They shouldn't be exuberant about it. They shouldn't be hooked on anything that's pleasurable. But there's one general who comes, and nobody told him that he's not supposed to enjoy it and be expressive about it. So she serves them this exquisite meal. And throughout the meal, everybody's there eating. He goes, now this is turtle soup. This is real, the best turtle soup. He goes course by course by course. And by the end of the meal, everybody their faces have uplifted, their hearts have opened, they're enjoying the food. And they say something to Babette. They tell her, now when you go back to France, they're going to send her back. She said, I'm not going back to France. And they said, well, why? You finally have the money? She said, I have no money. I put every penny that I won into this meal. Now I have nothing. And the main two sisters who have been in this village, who have closed their hearts, come up to her and hold her. And they say, you have everything. You have all of the love of God. When you leave here, the angels themselves will be happy to see you. Because And the whole town just wakes up again. She never said a word. She served them. She loved them through serving them, which is what this is about. There are two ways that we're going to get to this kingdom. One is that we can meditate our way there, or we can just serve people. Serve from our highest potential to their highest potential. Serve the divine reality in them. Not just serve, but consciously. Do it consciously. That's what we need to do. That's what Swamiji and Jesus are showing us here. You serve anyone with the love of God. You clothe them, you feed them. You do it with your heart open and consciously. And you will just awaken. You won't know what. Nobody has to say to you, I'm going to prepare a beautiful meal for you. You'll love it. After you eat this meal, you will be so in love with God again. You'll forget that everything was difficult. No, not a word. Just the serving, just the love. The transformation comes with it. It is so utterly simple. It's so simple, and it's such a beautiful message. And yet, we have to do it consciously, and we have to do it energetically. I hardly have time to say this, but I'll just say a little bit of it. The parable of the 10 bridesmaids, it really speaks to such an important lesson here, because as we know, they were waiting for the bridegroom. 5 of them got their oil and got ready so that whenever he came, they'd be prepared to go. 5 didn't. So in the middle of the night, they hear the bridegroom is coming, and the 5 who have oil can go, and the other 5 can't. And they say to these other bridesmaids, can't you just share your oil with me, with us? We need some oil. And the 5 bridesmaids who have the oil say, no, you'll have to go out and get oil. And I just am only mentioning it here because it speaks to the consciousness with which we need to attend to our lives and serve. The oil represents all of the consciousness that we've raised, all of the ways that we've served and cared, all of what we've done to raise ourselves. And we have got to do that piece of work ourselves. Nobody can do that for us. It can't be donated as a gift. We have to come to it. And if somebody else tried to give it, why couldn't they give it to their other 5 bridesmaids? Because they couldn't have received it. They weren't ready. We have to get ourselves ready. And to come back to where we were before, the way to get ready, the easy way from us, what Swamiji calls the social way, the not having to sit and meditate and get there, though of course we all want to be meditating, but when we can't do that, we find that love in our hearts and we serve people, and by that very act, we transform ourselves. By the very act of giving, without thought for what we're going to get. They didn't know. They had no idea that they were serving God Himself. They didn't have the consciousness to know it. They didn't have the awareness to know it. But it didn't matter. Jesus came to them and said, "You've given me so much." And that's all we need to do. Just continue to give. We don't have to be any place other than where we are in this world, on this journey. Right here, right now. Just start serving the divine in everyone we meet. And by opening our hearts in that way, we find ourselves in that expansion where we know without learning it through our minds, because we've learned it through the heart, again, where that indivisible reality of love and devotion lies, that we are a part of all that is, and we find God and we feel God, and we enter that state of consciousness that Jesus is inviting us to, called the kingdom of heaven. It is a state of consciousness, and we have a very direct path to it.
Sing we the Virgin Mary, sing we that matchless one. See how the angels attended her when she birthed God's own Son, when she birthed God's own Son. So silently came our Jesus unto his sweet Mary, as dew in April falleth on flowers so tenderly, on flowers so tenderly. When Jesus was a-born, to earth came heaven down, to lie upon a manger, away in Bethlehem's town, away in Bethlehem's town. A blessed maiden mother, be known to prophecy. Now Jesus is a-born, and all men honor thee, and all men honor thee. Away in a manger, no crib for a bed, the little Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head. The stars in the bright sky looked down where he lay. The little Lord Jesus asleep on the hay. The cattle